Welcome to MSP 1337. I'm your host, Chris Johnson, a show dedicated to cybersecurity challenges, solutions, a journey together, not alone. Welcome, everybody, to another episode of MSP 1337. I'm joined this week by Dave of Red Panda out of Las Vegas. Welcome, Dave.
Hey, thank you.
Hey, Dave, you've been on the show before, right? Like it's been a year, maybe a little longer.
I don't think we were on a show. We were in a conversation, but not the show.
We had a show, so we were saying we've had conversations, we just haven't recorded them.
We're correct.
Got it. That we know of. Someone's
Correct.
always listening, right?
It's out there, yeah.
So the majority of you listening know that largely, we have done multiple episodes over the last couple of years on risk management, on risk management plans. We've even done MSP Ignite town halls, back to the basics. We inevitably end up talking about risk. I happened to see your LinkedIn post when you recently were speaking at the UNLV on risk, since that was kind of like, I feel like we say this about advertising, like if you say the word enough times, it will show up in your face. So like all of a sudden my LinkedIn feed is talking about risk. All of a sudden a podcast I recorded for someone else's show back in May is smacking me in the face. And so why fight it? Let's talk about risk even more. And to your point, you were sharing with me earlier about the professor that is overseeing the cybersecurity program at UNLV and his theory on, people are 100% of the risk.
Right.
And while I tend to immediately gut reaction says, no, that's not true. The reality is it's true in the context of it's the one area of risk we don't want to focus on because it is the most difficult to get buy-in. It is always going to be our challenge. But to your point, what you said is if we don't do a better job of educating people on risk and the impact of risk to their business, to their person, to their family, then fundamentally we are failing at something that we should be very successful at, because those of us that care, those of us that have experience in navigating risk management and doing risk assessments, we should be able to make a difference. Because I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, educating somebody on risks, both good and bad, is not complicated once you have the conversation to explain to whoever is resistant to the idea that risk matters to them.
Right.
So you've been doing this a long time, and I think the story is also important. Walk me through your experience with regards to people being the problem. And I think I'd like to have our show kind of, as we go through some of the challenges in our experiences, to wrap up with, these are some things that as solution providers you absolutely can do, will make a huge difference in your ability to impact people within the organization that you're working with, as opposed to you're showing up with the line card and you're saying, hey, we need to do a risk assessment. And they're like, hey, I don't want to write you another check.
Right. So thanks for having me. I think one of the things, like last week, we were talking about the UNLV course that I was teaching at that time. What it really is it's a business-centered focused cybersecurity class. So they brought me in to talk about how to do business in cybersecurity, not the other way around, right? So what happens, their focus was primarily, why is cybersecurity important for business? Why do you need to understand business to understand cybersecurity? And that comes back to, like you said, I've got quite a bit of experience, as do we all. And most of the decision makers and executives are the people that make the decisions for the business. These are the same people that we have to explain risk to and why they should follow it.
And not laughable, but if you think about like the financial space, very rare that you'd walk into a bank at a board meeting level that they wouldn't be able to articulate at some form their risk strategy.
Minimizing their risk.
Yeah. Right. And in fact, I would go so far as to say, if it's a publicly traded company, there's a good chance that someone in the organization has got some sort of risk model put together for the shareholders and their investment portfolios. And I think what drives me absolutely nuts is when someone starts talking to me about the RACI matrix, or one of the, like, the probability and it's low versus high, and here's the 7 or a 6, and you're
Right,
like,
right.
okay, but let's just talk about things that we know are bad that could impact me. And is it financially reasonable for me to do some level of, maybe not removing the risk altogether, but at least lowering the risk, and have conversations that are a little bit less numbers and graphs and charts and red, yellow, green, and maybe more about, like, how do you have the conversation that just says, hey, if you look around you, do you disagree or agree that we need to put, say, antivirus on your system? And if you
Yeah,
disagree with that, that's okay, but please explain to me why you don't think it's worthwhile. Because maybe it's as simple as, like, well, I've had this vendor and this vendor and this vendor, and every single time we managed to get hit with ransomware, and it doesn't seem to be making any difference, right? Like, okay, well, we definitely need to reconsider that
right,
strategy. But
right.
is that are we on the right track here?
Yeah, yeah, I think we are. I think, like you said, there's definitely the risk acceptance as they talk about, but you got the
Sure.
risk transference too, right? You get an insurance company involved. And during my discussion, a lot of it was about what my feelings are on how cyber insurance comes into play. And the point being is it's after the fact, right? If you've gotten to the point where you need the insurance, then you're not doing most of your job, right? Because it really is about if, not when, right? So
And if
it's
not,
going to
when,
happen.
how much?
Yeah, yeah, right, right. So the point being with the risk, and I talked about this in my class, I'm a big believer in NIST 800-171. Right, there is a checklist there for a reason. It doesn't mean it's applicable to all, but what's the harm in trying to do it all?
Right. It's I've heard this said before, like, there's only three of us in our company, and
Yeah,
so this just seems
yeah,
like a really daunting task.
expensive.
And I often use the CIS framework as an example. It's like, it's got the implementation groups based on your
Yep,
capability or capacity to do this. And I have had this conversation so many times. I said, as a solution provider, you already are coming into this framework with so many pieces of the equation already happening in your organization, because you're a solution provider. Like, it says have asset inventory. You're using tools proactively with your
right,
own organization and all your clients to collect that information. And you're telling me that this is too hard. Like,
right,
too hard to what? Like, define it, too hard to accept it, too hard to, like, because you're doing it, but you don't seem to want to admit that you're doing it. And I think, kind of to your point, 800-171, 853, CSF, we could list off frameworks probably all day long.
yeah, yeah,
They all represent the same intentionality for
yep,
different data types, right? Like, the goal is more or less the
right,
same. How do you protect the data that's been entrusted to you based on the industry that it was built around? And
yeah,
what bothers me the most, and maybe you share this with me, I don't know, correct me if I'm wrong here, is when someone says, oh, yeah, we're not doing CIS, we're doing SOC 2 type 2. Okay, well, I don't care which one you've picked,
yeah,
but I also don't want to argue with you when we start talking about, say, things like asset inventory, or security risk assessment, or penetration testing. Those are all things that are going to be called out in the majority of the frameworks that are out there. So if we are really getting down to the form over the function, we're losing, because I think at the end of the day, function, more or less, is very similar across all frameworks, and the form is where they are different.
right. Right. So removing ourselves a little bit from the equation, or removing the frameworks from the equation. This is where my professor and I have talked and agreed, is this is where the human element does come in. So unless we as experts are able to explain the why, people will not be inclined to do so, right? And it has that trickle down effect, as we need to explain the why to the leaders and the owners, and those are the people that are going to make sure it happens in the company. Well, if they don't have our buy-in, if we're not good at communicating and we're not good at speaking in a way that they'll understand the why, it's probably not going to happen. Like you said, it doesn't matter if it's 3 people or 3,000 people. So if they don't have that buy-in, and the understanding, then it's probably not going to happen.
Do you think why is also the why in I think there's more than one why with this human element, right?
Yeah,
You're the solution provider, you come in and I say, why do I need X?
right,
As a solution provider, you can come up with a lot of things that are the why they need this. But two things come into play that will derail the entire conversation is why is because we're doing this for everybody and we
hmm,
want everybody on this. That's not necessarily a very good answer. And the second one is why you but not me? And this is the one that I run into a lot. You know, a client says, or I'll get this from a solution provider. The client is pushing back on
yeah,
firewall XYZ, and you know, you ask why, and the guy I talked to, he goes, "Well, they asked me what firewall we're using and why we're recommending this one for them." And I said, "What was your answer?" And he goes, well, we use XYZ firewall because we work from home. And I go, that's not a very good answer.
right. It's a terrible
Who's not
answer.
working from home? You know, the answer of saying we're a different type of organization, our business is built differently. We're all snowflakes. Well, now you can start having a conversation with them that says, I care about your organization uniquely to your business and the risks that come with it.
Yeah, you're dead on. It is definitely about caring about the person, but in the end, we got to realize that it's our name on it too, right?
Right. So our
Because it will
care.
come back on you.
So there is, so that's a good point. There is the why because I'm telling you, like as in like you hired me to be the solution provider putting security things in your environment. You know, it's kind of like shut your mouth
Right,
and put it in, accept
right,
it. It's like when you're trying to feed a baby and they don't want to eat it because it's green and mushy. I don't want to
right.
eat green and mushy either, buddy. So like, but I know that if I don't get my greens, it's gonna hurt later.
Yeah, and sometimes there is that risk where a solution is implemented for the betterment of the company, just because you know it's what they should be doing. It's not that every little detail in a framework has to be explained and
Sure.
understood by the other side, but sometimes we need to do that framework and start with, zero trust, start with least privilege, start there, and then allow people to do things. Be tolerant and accepting that people are going to come complain to us why they can't do something,
Sure.
and then have that conversation instead of the other way around of
Right.
having it totally wide open and then letting them complain their way down of the things that they want to see. We need to be more proactive and start implementing those things and let it open up gradually.
It's funny you say that. I was in DC a couple weeks ago for state ramp discussion, and there was a panel that was made up of CISOs, and in some cases they're like lieutenant, like number two person. I forget
Yeah,
what the exact phrasing was, and these were for like Riverside County, California, and I forget the other one. I want to say they were out of Ohio. I'm sure I'm butchering the where they're from part. But what
okay,
was really interesting is the CISO literally said, he goes, the only person in our municipality that can say no is me. That's it. No one else can say no. And I thought that was really interesting because when I was sort of in the CISO role, I wasn't very I wasn't very much enforcing that model, right? So like if one of the techs on my team told a teacher no, they couldn't do that,
right,
I didn't step in and go, oh, well, hold on a second. Because at the end of the day, to your point, when someone says, why is this no longer an option? Or why did you take this privilege away from me? Why can't I install applications anymore?
yeah,
In some cases, it's like, oh, you just wanted to be able to install applications. Okay, here's how we're going to approach that. If the application is approved within your organization as an application that's allowed to be installed and you feasibly could be the one installing it, here's the path to get those apps approved. And
right,
once those apps are approved, then I don't care if you're installing those apps and be able to explain the why this is being allowed. Because the reality is this does two things. One, you remove shadow IT because now you're aware of an application being requested.
yep.
And two, you're giving them the ability to work somewhat
The,
independently to go, hey,
the responsibility,
yeah, if it's in the corporate store, that means I have pre-approved access to this application, right?
right,
There's so many examples of that that are out there that it's like if someone is saying no on my team, if I was still a solution provider, they're telling a client no, they can't do that, we already have a problem, right? Because the reality is it's not a question of whether or not you're saying no to the idea of what they want to do. You're saying
Yeah,
no to that specific product. Like as we've seen, Foxit reader or some sort of, like, my favorite one, I see this all the time is yeah, so I got, this thing rejected from Chrome browser. It's my PDF reader. I'm like, you do realize your browser will open PDFs without the extension? They're
right,
like, well, yeah, but not the same way as I want it to. Okay.
right, right,
Well,
right,
let's have that conversation. What is it that you're looking for
right,
that this special app or extension you want to plug in is going to do? And then let's look at making sure we don't already have the
correct,
equivalent in the environment, because I don't want to
right,
manage 5 PDF viewers in Chrome, even if
right.
they're the best 5 PDF viewers on the market.
Yeah, yeah, no, and I like that too. With that approach is you also are cost conscious. So we're doing our job on multiple levels. We need to keep them safe, but we also need to be aware of the tools and software that they use and potentially and possibly come up with better solutions that are more secure for their environment. And I found that too, if we're allowed to explain our why, if we're good at what we do, which a lot of times we're not, we can be
Mm.
defensive or just say no because it's not secure without an explanation. But if we can do our job and explain it in a way, people will respect that more. And I think that has a trickle effect as well throughout the staff, right? People will be more inclined when they all understand why and why IT is involved and why we're doing what we need to do to keep them secure. Because if people want to say, well, I don't want to be secure, then you might have an issue. You might say, well, no, we're going to be open, or I might not want them as a client, or I may not be able to help them. They may want all these things to be able to help, but if they're not fully bought in or if they don't understand on what they should be bought in on, that's actually going to come back on you in the end anyway.
So you said something that um is one of those triggers that I have, because I hear this. It's not my trigger per se, but the
Should we test
knowing,
it out?
yeah, knowing. Chris, just his head just spun around and his eyes rolled in the back of his
Yeah.
head. What was that
Never
trigger word
seen that on
again?
a Zoom.
No, the question is, you're talking about like better understanding the client's business needs, better
Yep.
understanding the tools that they need to use to
Yep.
be effective, productive, efficient, whatever you want to call it, so that
Yeah.
we don't see shadow IT happen, right?
Right.
And I think this is the one where I hear a lot of pushback. We don't have time to be experts on their business. And it's a fair point, especially if you're a smaller solution provider. But I
Hmm.
thought about that and I thought, well, okay, you're not swapping out hard drives like you used to. We're
Correct.
not dealing with printer configurations like we used
Right.
to. The perimeter is largely defined in the context of, because we've got EDR and some other tools running on the endpoint, I don't have to worry as much about the network perimeter as I used to, because I now have tools that are protecting at the host level that are far more sophisticated than what we were dealing with even 2 years ago. So, what is it that a solution provider is spending time on that potentially is not the best use of their time? And maybe you don't have the answer for this. It's okay if you don't, but that's the question that's coming into my head, having left being an MSP back in 2018,
Yeah.
completely jumped out of the space, went to a school district, and while I was there, I began to understand very quickly how much I didn't know that I had to learn to stay effective in the job role.
Yeah. So I think people, and I still believe this, people get too lost in the weeds of after the fact, right? It's like staring at a seam all day long, staring at log files all day long. But if we do our job at the beginning, we have better filters in place, we have better review in place, we have all those things. So maybe IT, from what I've seen, gets too involved in the after the fact. I disagree with anyone that says you don't have time to understand the culture of your client because one, from a business perspective, that culture, that relationship is what's going to keep the loyalty from both sides. It's going
Sure.
to what's going to keep them as a client because now they feel like, hey, this guy really is involved, he's integrated, and guess what? Now he cares about my business. If you don't care, if you're not in that culture, what are you going to protect, right? The first step in most things is identify. Well, if you can't identify what you're protecting, and I'm talking about people,
Right.
You have to know what position they're in and what their job titles are and what software programs they use. If you're not going to take that upon yourself, you're going to be constantly in the weeds trying to figure out who's doing what and who just did what and why a certain person needs this software and this other person needs that software. So you have to understand the culture.
And
You have to.
this relationship that you're building with your client, to be candid, this isn't about being sympathetic to their needs. It's really just showing empathy, right? Like, we're not going to say, hey, we've had that same experience, we know what it's like to lose a pet, or we know,
Right. Right.
that's not what this is,
Well,
because even if we have that, it's not the same
well,
scenario. It's not the same.
yeah, you just said it. You go to somebody and they're like, I can't open my PDFs. I can't open them anymore. Well, you can't open the PDF. That's sympathy and empathy. Well, empathy is, oh, I can understand. Let's get that solved for you.
Sure.
In our mind, we're saying, well, yeah, you can open it in anything. PDF is a PDF, right?
Right.
So there's
Right.
two different perspectives. So you're right. A lot of it is empathy.
I've often thought about this. What does it look like to teach solution providers the how to lead from a cybersecurity standpoint? And it goes through my head probably once a week. And risk often is one of the leaders in, that first course might even just be like, how to tackle proactive reactive risk, and how do you come up with a mitigation plan for risk. But the more I think about it, the more I come back to the culture component in my organization is far more important out of the gate than all of the other things we're ever going to talk about. Because if our culture is a cybersecurity first mindset, then we are already thinking about things like risk, so that then a risk plan or a risk,
Right.
even an education track, is
Right.
something that we have the palate for, right? You can't walk you can't run before you walk, you can't walk before you crawl. And I think that's true. If your culture in your company, and correct me if I'm wrong, if the culture doesn't invite a cybersecurity first mindset, then talking about all of the other pieces from a business or technology perspective is honestly, I think, a waste of time.
Yeah, it's dead on because I mean, everything you can think of in risk, every single component of it starts with a conversation. And if you
And it's
can't have those
people.
yep, if you can't have that conversation with the people and you don't understand cybersecurity from that standpoint, like you said, if it's not already part of who you are, you can't have that conversation.
So
And
that's
there
a
you're
good
gonna,
that's a good way to say it. If it's not who you are, how are you going to ever have that conversation with a client?
right, right. Yeah, it's a representation of your business and who you are, the culture, everything.
Do you think that from a business perspective, the people part, we have to spend more time helping them understand the personal security side? 'Cause I think about
Yeah,
this a lot too. It's easy for me to point a finger at someone else at work and say,
right,
that's not my job. Like, someone else manages my laptop. Someone else is
right. The blame
responsible.
game.
The blame,
Yeah,
maybe blame is a negative in this context that I don't think is necessarily the case. I think it's more
yeah,
of, that's not my job role. Stay in
right,
my
right,
own swim lane.
right.
Culturally, I've been taught to, if it's not my job, maybe I make somebody aware of it, but I don't participate per se. Like, I, see something, say something, sure,
Yeah,
but that's pretty much the extent of what I'm willing to accept on the did my training program. But at home, I know I'm responsible for myself and my family and my finances, and all these things come into play. And then we leave it at home when we get to work. And I think if we can get them to be fully educated at home, that will come with them back to work.
yeah. I think this comes down to the training component, right? You said at home you have a certain role. You've got multiple roles at home. You go to work, you have very unique set of skills, as Liam Neeson says, right?
As
You
like
have a
him.
very unique set of skills. You have
Yeah.
one role or two roles, and that's what you do, which is important for what I call the role playing game.
Yeah.
That's part of the training. You have to open up the picture a little bit that we're all responsible. It's one cohesive unit. Everybody needs each other. It's not, hey, you're responsible for this and you're responsible for this. No, we're actually all one cohesive unit. So you have to have that culture.
I think about the battle we play with, oh no, you're not turning 2FA on my computer. And it's like,
Right, right. It's taking too long.
2FA. Yeah, so let's walk this one back. when you bank at home, do you have to put in a PIN code or some sort of like, do you have to answer a couple questions after you put your password in? Oh,
Right.
yeah. Do you think that that level of obligation is too much to ask of you here at work? Because that's important to you. Because if this isn't important to you, what you're really saying to me is this organization is not important enough to you. It's not at least as important as protecting yourself at home.
Hmm.
And you do realize that if you were compromised at work as an individual, there's a really good chance you're probably getting compromised at home too.
Yeah, and I think people should, again, this comes back to us and our training and being able to explain, but there's a lot of understanding that goes on too. I mean, hey, if somebody, I agree, maybe it is too long, but if somebody does get a hold of our information because of what we do, right? There's audit logs. Well, if somebody got your information, guess what it would look like who did the bad event?
Right.
It would have your name all over it.
It was me. Just kidding. Someone got
Right.
my information, right? Like
Right. Now, granted, there's obviously more extensive research and all
sometimes
that
there's
would go
not.
into it. True, true. A boss would just want to know who did what. How did they
Well,
get into
right. I
our
mean,
system?
go look at some employee handbooks and the policies that go with it. You are
Yeah,
responsible for protecting your identity as it pertains to you. You are responsible. It's like, okay, but
right.
if they got in through mechanisms that are outside of my control, they've used my identity, and I can't definitively prove that it wasn't actually me doing it based on policy and what's in our procedures, I may still be
Correct. You'd be
the
liable
scapegoat.
in
Yeah, I'm
some
liable.
responsibility.
And I don't think we put it like not proposing that policy should be written that way, but I think at the end of the day, we're not putting enough responsibility, burden of responsibility on people to in the context of see something, say something, right? I think the flip side is also true. We make people feel shamed and guilty to a point that
Hmm.
they don't want to tell you.
Yeah, yeah. Like children, they get scared.
Yeah, I got some marks off my score for the security training because I didn't report the emails, the phishing emails. I didn't report them. Like, do you realize how many emails a lot of us get? If it
Yeah,
looks
yeah,
bad, I'm deleting it. Like, if it's not pertinent that I read it, like it says, "Hey, you've won, an Amazon gift card or whatever," and I
yeah,
wasn't expecting to get that, I just delete the email. And I'm like, why
yeah.
are you punishing me for that? Why am I getting a lower score based on doing due diligence as far as protecting myself? I understand that you would like to have it reported. If that's the case, then we need to do an education track on what the expectations are for reporting on the I saw
Yeah, yeah.
something that was questionable. What's the best path? Because if you tell me like, oh, open a ticket, I've already turned off the switch. That's a lot of work on something that may not be valuable at all.
Yeah, it has to be the positive reinforcement, right?
Positive reinforcement. Yeah, I heard it from Arctic Wolf. I've heard it several times now. I think her name's Dina. I can't remember her last name, but she preaches the whole if security awareness training is not a encouragement and positive and something that people want to take, then you've failed in security awareness training.
Yeah, yeah, I agree.
Well, Dave, we have a few minutes left. Is there any specific things that you can think of that we might have missed that we should share with the listeners? Because we now created another episode that is focused on risk.
That might be a risk of losing clients in and of itself,
I've
but
lost my audience because I keep talking about risk. Thanks,
that's a risk you
listeners.
took.
I took a
Yeah,
risk. I did. Dave was the risk. I knew he wanted to talk about risks. I'm blaming it on Dave. So
yeah.
be shamed, Dave.
I'll take it. Yeah. And now I'm not going to I'm not going to tell you about it. I'm not going to report it to you.
Oh
No.
man. You got
Yeah.
feedback that you're not sharing with me because I was
Yeah.
shaming you. Got it. Man, this is rough.
No, I love talking about risk. I love talking about all this stuff, right? It's all important. I just, in the end, I really think a lot of it comes down to us, what
Yeah.
we're doing on our side. Are we doing the training? Are we doing a good job of explaining the whys? Are we doing a good job of helping people understand why things are in place or why they need to be a certain way, right?
Yeah.
Because if it's for the overall betterment of everybody, and they could even apply those learnings into their personal life as well.
Yeah. I also think I would add that I think this is an area where solution providers, even in the same geographic region, should not see themselves as competitors when it comes to talking about risk and educating
Yep.
the prospect or existing end users, because the reality is no one wants a client that doesn't understand risks at all, right? Like that,
Right.
that's just starting over at ground zero. So the reality is, whether you're losing a client to another MSP or you're getting one that might have been with another MSP, the more educated they are on their risk, the better everybody ends up being, because this is a joint effort, right? Like this is
Correct.
where you no better explanation would be like VirusTotal or something like that, where you've got these vendors that are like feeding into the bad things that are happening, rather than going, I'm not telling Sophos about what I found over here at Norton because we're
Right.
better than they are, right? Like that's not the reality. There's too much bad happening to not all try to work together for the betterment and the good of people.
Yeah. Agreed. Agreed.
All right, Dave, we're closing it out. Any last words?
No, happy Tuesday. Have a good day.
All right, happy Tuesday. For those of you listening, have a great week.